Hello, everyone, and good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to another author interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia. Maybe you know me as the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill. And joining us today is a guest making their official debut here on the channel. Now, my guest today is an author, artist, podcaster, digital content creator, entrepreneur, and self taught Byzantine history specialist. He is also the founder of the Byzantine Time Traveler, a company dedicated to promoting the lesser known yet captivating history of the Byzantine Empire. With Byzantine Time Traveler, my guest produces content for online publications, history websites, and social media. His educational products include the board game Battle for Byzantium and a collection of illustrated Byzantine themed playing cards. Aside from sharing the love and knowledge he has about Byzantium, he also aims to represent history content creators around the world. So, without further ado, everyone, let's give a huge round of applause to our guest today, author, artist, history uh, lover, and all around incredible content creator, Powee Celdran. Powee, welcome to the show.
Yes, thank you for inviting me to join your show.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, Bowie, before we dive into your book and a little bit more about you, is there a lesser known fact about you that not many people know?
Well, number one, I'm not a Byzantine history scholar. I have no degree in history in any way or Byzantine history. So I'm all self taught about Byzantine history. And I first learned about Byzantine history from the video game Assassin's Creed Revelations many, many
Yes.
years ago.
Awesome, Bowie. Awesome. I'm so excited to have you here and talk about your book. Now, let's actually dive into your book. So, for people who are now meeting you for the very first time, what can you tell them about a time traveler's guide to Byzantium?
So we'll start from here. My book that I wrote is a simplified version, a simplified guide to Byzantine history. It is made accessible for everyone. I made Byzantine history accessible for everyone from all over the world, from any walks of life. So it's made to basically interpret Byzantine history as something that everyone can understand and everyone can enjoy.
Ooh, nice. I love it. I absolutely love it. Now, let's actually go to the next question. What, as you mentioned before, that you were inspired by the history through Assassin's Creed Revelations, but what really gave you the push to write this book and then from there, create your content, your company? What was your aha moment?
What was my aha moment that made me decide to create
Yes.
content, my company? Okay, so this is a rather long story. It was many, many years ago when I first played Assassin's Creed Revelations, and I got interested in the Byzantine Empire because of it, because of the super weapon Greek fire that was in the game. So some years later in 2019, when I first got interested in Byzantine history, when I read a book, I don't know if you know the book, A Surprising Life of Medieval Empire, Byzantium by Judith Herron. I read a chapter about Greek fire, and that really sparked my interest in Byzantine history. And from then, I just kept on reading and reading. And then during the pandemic time, I decided to create content on Byzantine history online, on Instagram first, on Facebook, on YouTube. So yeah, it started there during the pandemic. I mean, my interest started in 2019, but then it was during the pandemic when I realized I wanted to create content for Byzantine history and make it known around the world.
Nice. All right. All right. Now, there's also going to be a few fan questions sprinkled throughout the interview. A lot of people messaged me privately as they had some questions for you about your
Really?
books, about your content. Yes. So, as a first little fan question, which is also our starter question for the main lineup, one of my viewers would like to know, as you began writing the book, what really surprised you about the history of the Byzantine Empire? Because as you mentioned in your bio, you cover some of the lesser known aspects of this empire.
Yes, very much. Yeah, I cover things other accounts, other books don't really cover. I mean, there are things I read about Byzantine history from other books, from websites, videos. and it talks about the little known things, the little known trivia about Byzantine history. And those are the things I really like about Byzantium, and what inspires me to create are the little things about Byzantine technology. The trivia about the fork, because the Byzantines introduced the fork to Europe and to the rest of the world. And like other things like, yeah, Greek fire, the mechanical thrones, those are the things that fascinate me most about Byzantine history. And also, yeah, like the architecture of Constantinople, the costumes.
Hmm. Absolutely, absolutely love the Byzantine period. I don't think it gets a lot of love or recognition because it is a successor of the Roman Empire. Yes, it did take on its own identity, but it was part of the Roman Empire for a long time before the split between, the creation of the Western Empire and the Eastern Empire, which actually kind of goes into my next fan question. My next viewer would like to know, ooh, this is a good one.
Oh,
Which fact that you uncovered while researching for the book was the most surprising?
the most surprising fact that I found out, like when I was researching for the book,
Mhm.
well, that's a tough one, but I think it's about Greek fire, how it was invented and when it was used, the many times it was used to save the empire from enemy attacks.
Nice. Yeah, Greek fire is a very interesting creation. Even to this day, we don't know exactly what was in it that allowed the Byzantines to create their naval flame ships, or just how dangerous it was. Or one thing I've also found as a historian and fellow history lover, is there were some accounts of potential flamethrower units of the Byzantine Empire, very crude in design, but just the idea of Greek fire being used as a flamethrower at that time, late antiquities, is just incredibly fascinating. Now, the next fan question, this one may be another tough one, Powee. So let's see if you can answer this one. They would like to know, in your research, which Byzantine emperor was your favorite to research and your least favorite?
Oh, well, that's a tough one, but I think the best emperor from my research, because I read also a book, an entire book about him. I mean, everyone would say Emperor Justinian the Great, but I find him
Yeah,
interesting. I did like 3 chapters in my book are about his reign, but the emperor that I found most interesting, based on research from a book, is Emperor Zeno, a predecessor of Justinian the Great, because without him, the success and stability that happened during Justinian's reign would have not been possible if not for Emperor Zeno, because he cleaned up the empire. He took care of all the rebellions and the military threats, and he stabilized the empire. And yet, no one really knows about him.
absolutely. Now, what about your least favorite emperor?
Well, that's also hard, but I would say maybe my least favorite, maybe because there's nothing written much about him, but I would say he's my least favorite emperor because he caused the downfall of the empire. Is an emperor like sometime after Justinian the Great's time. His name is Emperor Phocas. He started the war against the Sassanid Empire, and he brought the
Mhm.
empire down to the point that it reversed everything. Nothing could be saved anymore.
Absolutely, very, very true, Poe. And probably for me, probably one of my favorite Byzantine emperors, but also he doesn't get a lot of recognition, but he should, in terms of his military prowess as a military emperor, is Basil II, and what he did to stabilize the Byzantine Empire of the Macedonian dynasty. And I forgot what battle, but it was, I believe, his wars in Serbia that
Bulgaria.
really, yeah, Bulgaria, yeah, thank you. There was one battle that really cemented his legacy as a terror for any
Yes.
enemy of the Byzantines.
That is mentioned in my book as well. I dedicated an entire year spread in my book to Basil II and his conquest of Bulgaria. So yeah, he was also one of the most interesting figures that I wrote about and researched on. So a lot of Basil II is also mentioned in my book. The battle against the Bulgarians, yeah, in 1014,
Yes.
and his conquest of Bulgaria in 1018 is mentioned in the book as well, with an entire illustration about it. So I would just like to mention the artists behind my book. I did most of the artworks, but the big battle scenes of my book, thanks to, and a big shout out to Sicily-based artist Alessia Valastro.
Nice. Awesome. Awesome. And we're actually going to go more in depth on that when we talk about, the business side of being an author in terms of, marketing, networking, and the overall behind the scenes of promoting not just this book, but also your company as well. Now, I'm going to combine these two questions together, Apoy, because they really do kind of fit well. Ultimately, when writing this book, what was the need or desire you wanted to satisfy for your reader? And ultimately, what is the promise that you are making, not just to yourself, but to them as well?
Well, I basically want to make Byzantine history more accessible to everyday people from around the world in a more accessible and entertaining way.
Yes, I think that is very, very true because I think you'll definitely agree that not a lot of people know much about the Byzantines or Byzantium, other than that, oh, it fell to the Ottomans in the 1400s. That's pretty much about it for the everyday person who knows about Byzantium history, or if they even learn it from other media as well. But I like that you are telling the history of this incredible empire which dominated the late antiquities, even actually earlier antiquities, late antiquities, the medieval period, and into the late medieval era, which I think is very, very, very amazing. Now, ultimately, when people pick up this book, what do you want them to feel and experience?
I want them to experience like they're reliving Byzantine history, that they can actually experience the history itself through the illustrations, the travel locations that are mentioned. Like if they can travel to places, they would see those places where Byzantine history actually happened. And yeah, where they could basically, it's a visual book. So I want them to experience Byzantine history through visuals, entertaining ones.
Absolutely. And this kind of goes into our next fan question, Poe. One of my viewers would like to know how much research did it take to get the entire history of this book the way you wanted it?
That really required extensive research. Like I read a lot of books about Byzantine history before that, and I'm still doing it up until this day. I watched many videos on YouTube about Byzantine history. I listened to podcasts about Byzantine history. And from it is all those information combined where I got all the research to make this book. And it took a very long time.
Absolutely, absolutely. And being an author is not easy. It's a lot of hard work, a lot of grind and dedication to something that you are very, very passionate about. And I can definitely see, I had a chance to look at your YouTube channel, as we're going to be talking about a little bit later. You are very passionate about this. You want people to know more about it. You make it accessible, and it definitely does show. And ultimately, I think maybe we kind of covered this, but I'll ask it anyway. Ultimately, what will the reader gain from your book beyond having a much better understanding of the Byzantine period?
So what will the reader gain from my book?
Hmm.
Um, yeah, it's like more about knowledge about the lesser known Byzantine Empire that no one really talks about or no one really knows about. So yeah, to gain more knowledge about an underrepresented empire in history, and also all about its exciting moments, all the landmarks across the world about that have origins in the Byzantine Empire, and all the interesting stories about the emperors, empresses, military commanders, and just everyday people from the Byzantine Empire.
Nice. Yes. And I actually can't wait to add that to my collection because, funny enough, I am actually going to be working on a project, a secret project set during the Byzantine period. So I am
Nice.
definitely going to be getting your book to add to my research library.
Well, thanks. That's very nice to hear. Like, you should actually like get a copy of my book because it's very interesting, and I'm sure that will help a lot with your project.
Absolutely. I have no doubt about that. Now, this next question, Poe, is a very, very personal question. I'll give some context for this. For indie creatives like ourselves, there is a hesitancy to, let people know who exactly we are. And I've talked to a lot of people on this show who have shared their experiences of when they've let their friends and family know that they're either an author, they're an artist, they're a content creator, or what have you. there is that hesitancy. They usually tell them in the beginning or towards the end when there is, build up or there's a community growing. For you and for the content you create and for your book, when did you feel comfortable claiming the title of being an author and being a content creator, as well as being a history specialist? I know you mentioned before that you are a self-taught, but I wouldn't know that if you had just told me. Like, from your research and from your videos, I would be like, okay, this guy knows what he's doing. He has to like have, research articles out there. That's what I thought. And I was blown away by your videos. So ultimately tying back in together, when did you feel confident in yourself to say, you know what? Yeah, I am an author. Yeah, I am a history specialist. I know what I'm talking about. I've done the research. I know this is the area that I have the most knowledge in.
Well, that's a very hard question, actually, because that goes a long way back. I always wanted to write a book and be an author. But I think it goes back to 2019 is when I first found myself interested in Byzantine history, and I started writing things about it. But it was really, I think, around 2021 when I really wanted to take this career seriously.
Yes, that's almost the same thing around with me. I also began my career back in 2020, around that period. And again, as we're going to talk about, it's not easy at that time. Everything was out of whack with the lockdowns and everything. We were isolated, we were separated, and a lot of content creators and a lot of authors really had to reinvent themselves. And before we get into that discussion, there is one thing I did want to ask you is, with the publication of the book, what have been the reviews been like? And from those interactions with the reviewers, did you feel that your promise was fulfilled?
Oh, that's a very interesting one because, yeah, I have a feeling that my promise has been fulfilled. It's more like it's been positive, the reviews have been mostly positive. But I don't really have much reviews yet. It's just that it really gets positive feedback from buyers.
Oh, that's good. That is really, really good to hear. And now these next set of questions are what I like to call reflective questions. And the starter questions for this is a very loaded one, Powee. So I'll give some context for this. Now, back in 2020, 2021, that was, the lockdown era. A lot of us authors, a lot of us indie creatives really had to reinvent ourselves, and we built our careers during that period. And social media was a huge boom, and the industry has been greatly changed because of it. I mean, if you look back 20 years or so, even 30 years or so, indie creatives were not seen in a very, what's what I'm thinking of, very likable eye. But now it's been a huge boon. Like, indie creatives are like all the rave, and they should, because there have been so many incredible people. And as we're going to talk about later, you've had the opportunity to collaborate with a lot of independent artists who have made the artwork for your book to bring your vision to life. And social media has been a huge boon in that regard because it allows us to connect and interact with our readers. But with that said, it's a double-edged sword. We unfortunately allow ourselves to be exposed by the darker side of social media. Writer's block is definitely prevalent. I imagine there are probably some days where you were stuck on a section of the book or a chapter, or couldn't get the research right to tell a certain part. And imposter syndrome, which is always going to impact anyone. I don't care who says it. Imposter syndrome is always going to be there. So ultimately, Powee, with that said, what has still disciplined you to stay true to yourself as the person who started this journey with the book and then with your company looking back?
It's going to be quite a while to discuss, but yeah, what really inspired me, I guess, or to keep going is what
Yes.
you're asking, right?
Yes.
Well, the fact that I get many followers on my social media sites, Instagram, Facebook, many interactions, that really keeps me going to keep posting more about content about Byzantine history, and also more interesting facts that I find about the Byzantine Empire keeps me going, and more people interacting, more people to talk to, and of course, more
Nice.
customers to buy my products.
That's awesome, Bowie. That is amazing. And
Yeah.
from what I've had a chance to look at your profile as well, you definitely have a large following of people who are very, very interested. And that goes into our next question. So there are a lot of reference books, a lot of research books that talk about the Byzantine Empire, either the late antiquities era, the medieval age, or maybe an aspect of wars and famine during the Byzantine period. What can readers expect from this book that will be different from other books?
Okay, I think what my book has different from other books is that it is very visual, very engaging in storytelling. It's not like most other Byzantine history books, I would say. Most other Byzantine history books are very academic, and people who don't really know much about Byzantine history won't be able to understand it. I mean, with all the sources, the footnotes. My book doesn't even have footnotes or sources at the end. It's just a straightforward story about Byzantine history. I wrote it as if it were a storybook with
Ah,
illustrations. Yeah, it's like it's really just a long story. It's like over 1,000 years put into one book.
nice. Very, very nice. And I think you may have already answered this, but I wonder if you can go a little bit more in depth is when writing your book, did what is your why in essence? I think you may have already answered this, but I wonder if you can
Yes.
go a little bit more. Like, what is your why? Why did you want to write a visual book as opposed to a reference book?
Well, because I wanted to create something new, something innovative. Because Byzantine history books are not very visual, they're not very accessible. Most Byzantine history books aren't like that. So I wanted to change this whole landscape of books about Byzantine history by writing something more accessible, more engaging, more visual, and just like a long story made more accessible to everyone.
Absolutely, 100%. Now, I think you've already answered this as well, but I'm going to change it just a little bit. Now, I've talked to a lot of authors on this, as well as a lot of historians, history specialists, history buffs, content creators, and it's on this notion of generative AI and the role of AI in content creation and writing books. And a lot of people have a lot of opinions on this. And a lot of people have shared their thoughts on, how AI is being seen as more favorable in terms of creating content, mass producing creativity, but it's kind of false because it's very stale. It doesn't have that human aspect, that human touch. And a lot of authors and a lot of people I've had on the show have shared their concerns how it's going to put authors on the back burner, that it's going to be not necessary to have authors anymore write books or create stories when you can have a program generate it for you. So, in the wake of technologically driven content like AI, Poe, what still motivates you to create content, to promote your book, and possibly write another book similar to this in this style?
Well, I think about the AI, the whole AI thing. Well, it helps sometimes. Like I use it to like not for research, but to like improve on stuff, like just to ask opinions and all that. But it's like people still like original work. That's why
Hmm.
they are interested in my book. They still like original artwork, original text based on research. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I 100% agree. I love when, AI can be used to help brainstorm topics, which I think that is a good thing to like get the ideas going. But everyone loves original work. Everyone loves seeing stories written by people that, help the scholarship and just help tell an amazing story. Now, as authors, we are always motivated and inspired by people that we've grown up reading. So, who is your role model author, Poe?
Oh, that is quite a hard question, but I've read many authors about Byzantine history or many other authors. I think it is, well, the one who inspired me to be interested in Byzantine history is Judith Herron from The Surprising Life of a Medieval Empire, and among other books I read of hers. But
Ooh,
yeah,
I don't think I've heard of
because
that person.
you've never heard of her, but yeah, there was this one book that I read and it really sparked my fascination for Byzantine history because of the way it was written. It was very straightforward and very explains everything in very great detail. It's very informative. It is the gold book, Byzantium, The Surprising Life of a Medieval Empire, which started my interest in Byzantine history. But another author I would say is the author of A Cabinet of Byzantine Curiosities, Anthony Caldelas, although he's very academic in most of his books. But this book of his is very interesting. It's all the trivia about Byzantine history.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that kind of goes into my favorite segment, the business side of being an author. So we'll start with an icebreaker question for these line
All
of
right.
discussions, Poe. So once your book was published, what really surprised you about the marketing aspect of that journey of being an author? And looking back, is there anything you would have done differently?
Well, what I would have done differently is to be more involved, I guess, in the marketing. But I am already doing that. I mean, I'm promoting my own book through social media on Instagram, on Facebook, my podcast. So yeah, I am like promoting my book by a lot. The artists behind the book are also promoting it, especially Alessia, who did 12 illustrations for the book.
Nice, nice.
And
And
I'm
also,
getting a lot of interviews also as well. Aside from this, I have like a few others on articles.
congratulations.
Yeah,
That's
thank you.
amazing. And this actually kind of goes into my next question when it talks about, uh, community and networking. This is a two-part question, Poe, and I'll give some context for this. As indie creatives, what I've seen from the community is that we are very inviting. We always want to help our fellow indie creatives. I know people tend to believe that the industry is very cutthroat and very, me against you or whatever it may be. But that's not the case. We are all in the same boat together and we all work together. And it's from these, network connections that friendships are made and our own little communities and teams are built upon. So I was wondering if you can share with the viewers how you got in touch with the artists who provided the illustrations for your book. And ultimately, in your opinion, how important is it to network?
Yeah, this is very important actually as like creatives like us,
Mm-hmm.
like authors, artists to work together. I mean, the whole point of my book was to represent history content creators who are often underrepresented. Like most history books are written by academics. So by writing this book, I wanted to represent other history content creators, independent history content creators. But yeah, about networking, like this book was actually a product of networking with other content creators. Like a lot of the information also came from the posts of other history content creators out there from around the world and artists also. Like, I mean, it is finding artists, it's a very hard job nowadays to like find good
Mm-hmm.
artists like for books. But I'm
Yes,
glad that
that's
I've
true.
I've found two other artists to work on my book aside from myself.
Nice, very nice. And now I was wondering if you can tell us about the board game that you have worked on, Battle for Byzantium. I was wondering if you can tell us a little bit more about that and how that came about.
Well, that was the first project that I created. Like, first product in my Byzantine business was the board game Battle for Byzantium back in 2023. It was actually my college thesis project.
Oh, really? It was your college thesis project?
Yeah, for entrepreneurship, the course of entrepreneurship, I had to come up with a product to make a business out of it. So it was the board game.
Nice. And is that like available for people to actually purchase and buy, or is it like kind of just hidden for yourself and like for a select few?
It was actually for sale before, but I don't sell it anymore because all copies are sold.
Ah, okay. Darn. I wish I would have gotten that so I've added to my
I
collection.
wish
That would have
so
been an
too.
amazing game. Nice. All right. So now let's talk about another aspect of the business, and that is, of course, the audience. And I think this is a very important question to talk about. And I'll give some context to this question, Poe, because as you mentioned before, a lot of books that are about, you know, Byzantium or Byzantine history is very academic. And for this book, A Time Traveler's Guide, you didn't want to be academic. You want it to be a book that anyone could read to jump into and learn about the Byzantine history. But I imagine that there probably was a balance between you wanted to be correct in your research, but you didn't want to, for lack of a better term, bore people with the academic jargon that's in a lot of other reference books or research books. So, when writing this book, how did you find that balance between being academically sound in terms of the research that was presented, but still telling a story that's easy to understand?
Yeah, actually, when I was writing the book, I was trying to find that balance with sounding more credible, so that I can be taken seriously, and to sound more accessible and entertaining as well. So I write posts that are very entertaining in my on my Instagram account. So the way I wrote the book was is just very much like the style of the way I write my Instagram posts. And
Awesome.
but to make it more like academic, I had to mention a few sources, and like from historical sources I had to mention those things, and I had to like write it in a way that is sounds smart actually. Yeah.
Absolutely. And kind of following to that, I'm actually going to combine two questions together because they, again, really flow really well. Now, for authors, we are the target audience first and foremost. We know the story better than anyone else. But sometimes we do have to think of an audience in mind. Now, a lot of authors that I've had on the show have had differing answers. Some have written the books for themselves without considering the audience, whereas others have written for an audience in mind as part of their goal. For you, Poe, did you write this book for yourself, or did you write it specifically for an audience in mind?
Well, the kind of audience I had in mind are people like me who are history enthusiasts, history buffs, but are not really academics themselves, but they're just very interested in history, very interested in art, in travel, and also more like the audience I had in mind. They're like first timers who don't know about Byzantine history but want to learn about it.
Absolutely. And on the topic of, you know, content creation, so content creation, I was wondering if you can also share with the viewers how your YouTube channel came about. And an add on to that, another fan question. One of my viewers would like to know which video was your favorite to make?
Oh well, I've been doing my YouTube channel for a very long time now, for like over 10 years now. And I've been making Lego films and videos. Like lately, it's been about Byzantine history. Like ever since I think 2021, it's been all about Byzantine history. So my favorite videos to be made, actually, like the videos that I like making, that I enjoy making out of the whole history of my channel, were the Lego films. And in particular, it's the Byzantine Lego films. I would say it is the 2020 Lego film, War of the Sicilian Vespers.
Ooh, I don't think I saw that one. I have to go and check that out.
Really, that's cool. I mean, it's about the Byzantine Empire during the time of the War of the Sicilian Vespers in 1282, and how they fought off the French in Sicily. So yeah, I would say it's that one.
Nice. Very, very nice. Now, we talked about in the beginning how your book is maybe different from, the research books that exist. But if you had to pick a book that's similar, what book would that be?
Well, the book I think is most similar to my book that I wrote. There's this book that I have also about Byzantine history. It tells the history of Byzantium in a very straightforward way through the lives of the emperors. So it's about the biographies of different emperors put into one book. It's called The Emperors of Byzantium.
Yes. All right. Nice. And do you have a book that is different from yours?
I
If
have
you
a
had to
lot.
pick?
Well, I have a lot of Byzantine history books in my collection. I have a whole shelf full of Byzantine history books. So I think the most different, like, would be the most scholarly ones. I also have some of the most scholarly ones as well.
All right. All right. Nice. And after when this episode is done, I have also a book about the Byzantines. I don't know if you may have this in your collection, so I'll definitely share it with you afterwards. But another one, which I think very interesting, is the readership. And the reason why I bring this up is that when we think of like an audience, we think of that is the main thing. But readership is also very interesting as well, because readership can be, middle school grade, could be young adults, it can also be adults. So beyond the audience, beyond, fellow history buffs, did you have a specific readership? Like, would you say this book could be read by someone who's in like middle school, high school, college level?
Yes, I would say that actually. Like when I sold my book at the bazaar one time, like it was bought for a kid and a kid was reading it. So yeah, I would say from like middle school age.
All right,
Because it's
nice.
very
Very nice.
easy to read, very easy to understand, and the visuals make it even more attractive for young people.
Nice. Very, very nice. Now, okay. Now we're getting into another good fan question. This is one's probably my favorite. If you had to interview one of the Byzantine emperors or empresses, who would it be and why?
Well, that's a tough question, but yeah, there are just 90 emperors actually, so many emperors in the history of Byzantium. But I would like to interview, I would say, Byzantine Emperor Michael VIII Paleologos.
Ooh, I don't think I know that one. I don't think I know that emperor.
He's like one of the genius emperors, diplomatic genius. Yeah, I would like to interview him about like how he handles like diplomacy with other kings around Europe and around the world because he
Ooh,
succeeded like in getting his achieving his goals through diplomacy.
nice. Very, very nice. And that actually goes into a very specific fan question, which I am so glad this viewer actually sent to me. They would like to know, and I'm going to paraphrase this, Poe, but they would like to know, and this may be a spoiler, so you can give as much or as little, but they would like to know, in your book, do you cover the history of when the Byzantine Empire was in talks to possibly join the Carolingian Empire under Charlemagne?
Yes, definitely. One of the year spreads. My book features 62 important years in the history of Byzantium, all handpicked by myself. So in the year 802, I mentioned that, like Empress Irene, there's a drawing of her, a very stunning drawing of the Empress Irene in my book by artist Sara Garcia from Seville, who specializes in medieval themed art. And this is one of the highlight drawings of my book. It's about Empress Irene who wanted to marry the Carolingian Emperor Charlemagne. So the whole chapter, the whole year spread in the book is about how Empress Irene proposed marriage with Charlemagne to unite both empires, and how it led to her downfall.
Yes. And for those that don't know, and I won't give too much spoiler because it's in the book, but there was a period in time, viewers and listeners, where the Byzantines wanted to merge or at least discuss a political marriage with the Carolingians. And I want you to imagine that, viewers and listeners, had that have been successful, you would have seen a new empire being born, possibly one of the strongest empires to emerge in the late antiquities, early medieval period. But as Poe's book will demonstrate, that did not come to pass.
Yes, that is more like an alternate history story in Byzantine history. If the empires united, if Charlemagne and Empress Irene married, then that would have created like one of the most powerful empires. Like the whole Europe is reunited. It's like the Roman Empire all over again.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, you did talk about, the authors and the other history content creators that you have worked with in, bringing this book to life. But are you a part of any writing groups like outside of content creation?
Actually, no, I'm not part of any other writing group. I write independently, but I've written for other history sites as well. I've
All
written
right.
for Easy History, The Freelance History Writer, and Byzantine Real History.
Ooh, okay. I'll definitely go and check those out as
You
well. Thank
should.
you.
I have a few articles for those sites.
Ooh, nice. I definitely need some new reading material. And after this interview, I'll also get you in touch with a good friend of mine, Courtney Atkins, who runs his
Sure.
own publications. And I think your work will be perfect for his.
All right. Yeah, that sounds great actually.
Awesome. Now, what would you say best describes you? Would you consider yourself a hybrid author or an indie author?
I guess I would say I'm more of a hybrid author.
All right, all right. And hybrid, I feel as if, kind of adding on to this, hybrids don't get a lot of recognition because when people think of hybrid, unfortunately, most people think of vanity authors or vanity publications, but that's not necessarily the case. There are like some, sorry, genuine hybrid publishers that really help independent creatives.
Yeah, but my book is self-published actually, so yeah.
Okay. All right. All righty. Now, I think you already may have touched on this, but what would you say are your biggest inspirations when it comes to your writing?
My biggest inspirations for my writing, it's storytelling, entertaining storytelling.
All right. All right. Now, ooh, okay. Here's another good fan question. What was probably the one part of your book that was the most frustrating to write, either in terms of it did not flow right or the research was not there? What chapter really like frustrated you?
Oh, yeah, actually, there have been a lot of chapters like that. Like, I think it was the Fourth Crusade era of Byzantium, like the temporary collapse of the Byzantine Empire to the Fourth Crusade, because there's a lot of information about that, the sack of Constantinople, and how the
Mm-hmm.
empire fragmented after that when the Europeans took over the Byzantine Empire and like split it up into many states. So it's very confusing afterwards. Like, so I had a hard time writing that because there's so many things happening all at the same time.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, I think you may have already um answered this, but maybe you can go a little more in depth, Apoe. What books would you say challenged you to write this book? Like, what books really pushed you to make something the same caliber, or if not better?
Well, I was inspired to also create content and like write books because of a Byzantine history comic book series from Greece, the Byzantine Tales comic book
Ooh,
series. I wanted to be like them, like to start my own company for Byzantine history related products that are like entertaining and visual.
nice. Now, before we get to the very end, Poe, there are a few last questions I did want to ask you.
Sure.
I actually wanted to ask you about a little bit more about your podcast and how that came about.
Oh, well, about my podcast. I'm now at the 24th episode. I've been doing it since July last year. So I was inspired to do it because many other creators also do podcasts about history, especially history content creators. So I wanted to do mine as well. Like I wanted to make a podcast that is like my book that makes Byzantine history accessible to everyone, a non-academic podcast for made history made accessible for everyone.
All right, all right. And what have been some of like your most memorable episodes?
My most memorable episodes, well, one of them was like just came out very recently. I talked about the ethnic origins of Byzantine emperors, what mixed blood they had, because Byzantine emperors were really a mix of like different ethnicities.
That is
And that
true.
was
That is
a
very
very
true.
very much a hit, and it was the longest episode I made so far.
Absolutely, absolutely. And oh, okay. I'm so glad I asked about the podcast because another fan question wants to know in your podcast, do you discuss any topic on the Varangian guards, the Norse mercenaries who are the bodyguards of the emperors?
Yes, I think I've discussed about the Varangian Guard in two episodes. The first one was about like international relations with the Byzantine Empire and Scandinavia. I talked about how the Varangian Guard served the Byzantine Emperor in that episode. I believe that was episode 12 of my podcast. And again, in episode 21, I discussed about the Varangian Guard as being one of the many mercenaries that fought for the Byzantine Empire.
Yes, absolutely. And I definitely think the reason why that I honestly think that question was sent to me was because the only like record we have of them in media is of course Vikings Valhalla season 3, where that term has been, brought to a much wider audience. And I know a lot of people have a lot of issues with that season in terms of historical accuracy and the representation of the Byzantines and the Norse, but that's a discussion for another time. But it is very nice to like have mention of the Varangians because their connection to Byzantine history is often overlooked and the role they've played. Now, my next question is kind of again a little bit more personal. Who would you say are your biggest supporters on this journey of yours?
Oh, well, my biggest supporters aside from family and friends are like from around the world, other history content creators, I guess. I would say other history content creators.
Nice. Are there any particular people you would like to give a shout out to?
Yeah, of course. Like my friends from the community of history content creators around the world. I think you've interviewed one of them before, and she recommended me to you to for the interview. The Sicilian School, Dr. Anne Maltempe.
Oh, yes, that's correct.
And of course, there's a medieval Arab history, um, the Byzantine Maslar from Turkey, other Byzantine history accounts as well, Byzantine heritage, of course, the History of Byzantium podcast, and other history content creators, I would say, like Ancient Roman Snack Bar, other
Ooh,
ancient Roman history accounts. Yeah, among others
nice.
to name. And of course, the artists who supported me, there's Alessia Valastro and Sarah Garcia.
Nice, nice, Bowie. Well, I have to give a huge thank you to her after this interview, and definitely check out the other people that you mentioned. I definitely want to look into them and listen to some of their episodes. Now, here's our last fan question before we get to the closing segment of Hoey. Now, this one's kind of a more difficult question I've had a lot of people struggle with. As a fellow creative, when writing this book, which did you find to be the most difficult? Knowing when to stop editing the book or knowing when to stop writing the book?
I think it is both because when I wrote the book, the draft was very long. I wrote it just over 2 months, actually, the whole book, the whole draft of
Wow.
the book. But it was so long. So I had an editor, like big shout out also to Ria, my editor for the book.
Nice, nice.
Yeah,
2 months, really?
yeah, she edited everything, not in 2 months. That took much longer time. Like I wrote everything in 2 months, but it took her like about more than a year, I think, to like edit everything I wrote and to make it sound more entertaining, more engaging.
Nice. Very, very nice, Bowie. Now we arrive at the final questions of this amazing author interview. Now, at the end of the day, from our discussion, what do you want people to take away from not just your book, but your content and your podcast? And what is a word of wisdom you would like to give to the fellow writers and fellow history content creators?
What kind of advice would I like to give to other fellow content creators and writers
Mhm.
about history? Well, it is more like to be original and follow your dreams and like don't be pressured by other bigger time authors and just do what you believe in.
Nice. Well said, Hoey. Well said. And on that note, viewers and listeners, we conclude this incredible author interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. Want to give a huge thank you to Hoey for coming on the show, making his official debut here on the channel. And if you would like to see him back on the show in an episode of the Historians Lounge, we can talk a little bit more about an aspect from his book. You know what you have to do. Like this video, comment down below, and subscribe. Hoey,
Uh,
thank you so much
Thank you
for
too.
coming
I
on the
would just
channel.
Yes, thank you too. I would just like to sorry for like getting in the way while you were still talking, but I would just like to show my book before we end the
Oh,
episode.
yes, of course. Of course. Here it is, everyone. A Time Traveler's Guide to Byzantium. I'll provide the link down below in the description of this video. And speaking of the book, Poe, where can people buy a copy of your book as well as follow you on social media?
Well, first of all, follow me on social media on Instagram at Byzantine Time Traveler and on Facebook at Byzantine Time Traveler by Powee Celdran. My podcast, the Byzantine Time Traveler podcast, and on Patreon, Byzantine Time Traveler. You can order my book at my website, www.byzantinetimetraveler.com. The link is there to the form where you can order the book.
Nice. I'll link all that down below in the description of this video. Again, everyone, thank you so much for coming on the show. I wish Powee the very best from one author to another and one fellow content creator to another. I wish him the very best.
Thank you again, Gabriel.
Absolutely, Powee. Thank you. And until next time, everyone, this has been the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill signing out. Wish you all a wonderful day wherever you are in the world. Happy Thursday, everybody, and we'll see you all in the next episode. Take care. Have a wonderful day.